Hello, everybody. This is Olga. Hi. And if you have missed me before for the introduction, I am the other half of Smart Purse, the person that does all the financial education and works on the technology. And welcome to Money Rally for those of you who joined newly. Otherwise, I hope everybody else enjoyed the very first session. I am here joined by Inga Beal, fantastic person, icon of inclusion and gender equality. And obviously, Inga, you also have a lot of experience in finance. And with me here is also Jack, the CMO of Metal, Metal is providing, I think, a very innovative solution to deal with startups, to help startups to manage their finances better. And then I was supposed to be joined here also by Tracy and Daniela Jenkins, who I had seen in the preparation room before, but now I see a person, Anna Moore. So, and two people are missing. So that seems to be a little bit of a thing. Just bear with me for 1 second until we find out where they are. Just 1 minute, okay? For now, make yourself comfortable, Jack and Inga, and I hope that we will be able to start this shortly. I'm just going to check my phone here on what has happened.
Just means I can have a sip of tea.
You can have a sip of tea, exactly. Well, I am sure tech support will sort this out for us one way or the other. So let me start maybe with you, Inga. And the very first question, I mean, this is a panel to discuss a little bit what is really happening with our money. And there's been so much out there, right? Nobody would have expected such a global pandemic to hit. Then all the Black Lives Matters movement followed. There is the US election that has happened and is still kind of happening. And there is obviously in the UK also a lot of uncertainty caused by Brexit. Well, what in your view is all of this doing to our money, in particular the women's money?
Well, I'm particularly focused on women and gender equality, having been working for 40 years almost in a very male-dominated industry of insurance. I have been pushing the cause for gender equality for many years. And about 5 years ago, a group of us, all women working in the insurance sector, launched something called Insuring Women's Futures. Now, when we started this research, and I must admit most of the hard work is down to a friend of mine, Jane Porters. But when we started it, I was immediately struck by how different the risks in life that women face are to those that men face. And what that means actually is that women experience financial gaps compared with men throughout their lives. And this I'd already knew that there was some sort of gender pay gap going on, and this was before the mandatory pay gap reporting in the UK. But some of the stats I've read were really scary. So there is such a big difference that in the UK, at retirement age, women on average, and this is all women in the UK, women on average have only 20% of the wealth that men have. And this was the first sort of startling statistic I saw. And unfortunately, what's happening now is my fear is that actual gap is going to get bigger rather than smaller. Now, I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but the pandemic has impacted heavily more on women. And it's women who are, the most financially exposed. In other words, it's the sort of most vulnerable have been made even more vulnerable. We see this in many crises around the world. And of course, what also the COVID-19 has brought sharply into focus, and perhaps also some of the other things that are going on in the world, but it shows how sensitive our financial well-being is to our healthy well-being. And I mean particularly our mental health, but also indeed our physical health. And while the pandemic to date has affected mostly men in a physical way, those who are older and in retirement, so they've had real an increased threat to their lives. To my mind, it's women who are more affected broadly, and that means educationally, emotionally, in the workplace, at home, and in receiving and giving care. So to me, I get overly concerned for women at the moment because girls and women, and this is across very broad society, they tend to still shoulder the burden of domestic work, of caring, and all the homeschooling that had to go on. They also have sustained the greatest job losses. And for me, the increase in sexual and domestic abuse, which Jude has already mentioned, the domestic abuse against women has been absolutely shocking. And so I sort of look as though have times moved on, where are we in gender equality? And I just get very, very concerned about the impact on women in particular. Now, further, women tend to be perhaps more in low-paid jobs, and we know typically many from ethnic minorities are in those low-paid jobs, and the vast majority of those low-paid jobs are key workers. And we also know that the consequence of their greatest exposure or their greater exposure to coronavirus is leading to a rise in hospital admissions, even for the 20 to 40-year-old women now in the second wave. So something to be very, very concerned about. And we also know that women are, they're more likely to be not only just losing their job, but being furloughed or perhaps having their hours reduced. And I mentioned the wealth and pay gap earlier, and this is just going to exacerbate that. And it starts early on in life. We know that even when apprentices start work, girls are on about 21% less than the boys. Now, this may be because of the field or the career they choose to go into, but the fact of the matter is that some of the choices that girls and female students are making about their careers can have a really, really big impact on their future life. And at the moment with the pandemic, the girls and female students are really concerned about the lack of academic support and particularly career guidance. And these are really critical life decisions that some of these women and girls are going to have to make. And then, of course, on top of all of this, women have a greater life expectancy. So we often outlive our male partners. And if we think about the future and the rising costs of healthcare, whether it's in the home or otherwise, means that women's long-term financial well-being is really, really important right now. And if I think about the pay and wealth gaps already mentioned, we've got to do as much as we can to still keep pushing equality for women and financial independence for women. So the more rallies like this can get the message out to girls and women, get interested in managing your money, and particularly not just today's, the money in your hand today, but really about the future.
Oh, wow. So that is quite a concerning picture you are painting here, Ringa, right? And it was also this morning I read a statistic that really stuck with me, that mothers in the UK are 1.5 times more likely to lose their jobs than the fathers. And Jack, I'm not going to ask you now how this makes you feel. I just would like to know, do you happen to have a sister or a daughter?
Yeah, I have a younger sister. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe back to you, Inga. Despite all of this dark picture that seems to be shaping here, are there opportunities? Are there things that give us hope that we could look at positively?
There are, and I am actually generally a very positive person. And if I think about it, at the very, very high level, partly sparked by the Me Too movement for women, and then now even more so with the Black Lives Matter that you mentioned, there is definitely a focus by government and big business on diversity, equal opportunity, and the gender and race pay gap. So I know that there will be a different future. Now, we've known, for instance, for some time that investors looking to support female or Black entrepreneurs have been somewhat reticent, and there have been all sorts of academic studies showing that if you're pitching to raise money, the questions asked of a male versus a female are very different, and the men traditionally get asked the very positive questions about how they're going to manage the growth of their business. The women get asked the more negative questions about how they're going to manage it when things go wrong. And so this already puts women, or can put women at a disadvantage, as everything we're hearing, if it's more negative, it makes us sort of go in on ourselves and lose our positive side. So negativity can put doubts in our minds. But there's good news. Now there are various banks and big fund managers who are specifically putting aside money to invest in female and Black entrepreneurs. And this really is good news, because we know the future of the economy is going to be much more entrepreneurial. The younger generation all want to be these entrepreneurs. They want to be part of the gig economy, and it's going to be an absolutely key part of our future society. So it's good news that there's actually going to be concerted efforts to back and invest in more women-run companies. And we've also got the other good side, I think, and particularly since the government just made its recent decision that it wants to be the leading world economy on the green and sustainability stage in terms of the environment, there is increasing pressure on companies to report and take action around the impact on the environment. And so hopefully we can do some aversion of the damage brought about by climate change. And I think the interesting thing for all of us, or many of us who are fortunate enough to have a pension, we can actually start putting pressure on those fund managers to say, invest in something green. And these days they're going to listen. And I don't think they would have listened so intently before the pandemic.
So that gives us hope, a lot more conscious investing, and obviously a lot being done for women. Yet still, of course, people call this kind of recession the she-cession, right? Because women absolutely take the lion's share, not only of the burden of dealing with the pandemic, but obviously it hits us also at a situation where by default women are in most cases more financially vulnerable. Do you feel, Inga, that enough is being done for women? Or is actually gender equality in all of this taking a little bit of a backstake because they are more pressing issues?
Having looked just in the sector I work in, financial services, and I was the CEO of a major institution, and I look across and I see hardly any females in those top jobs. So I know not enough is being done for gender equality. I had a little bit of a fear, particularly after the Me Too movement, that gender equality was a little bit under pressure. We definitely started to change our tone of voice. We wanted to engage much more with men. So it's a sort of equal sharing of responsibility to sort out this gender equality problem. And I think anyone who is engaged in doing any work around gender equality, get the men involved. We can't do it without them. And that's something that perhaps I really learned about 5, 6, 7 years ago, perhaps, that we've got to get everybody around the table. But we have to keep pushing. It's not going to change unless we keep pushing. And particularly for women, not just in the UK, but across the world, there are some terrible stories out there. And so we've got to keep pushing together. And if we all support each other and we become this massive sisterhood, I think it's amazing what we could achieve.
Oh, thank you. So I think, Jackie Taylor, who I spoke to last week, gave this a wonderful name. She's like Sister Up. And I really love it so much because it's such a nice thing. So everybody here on the panel, Sister Up. Thank you so much, Inga. Daniela, wonderful you could join. And it's brilliant you overcome the hurdles of technology. That's already the first step. You are an absolute expert in pensions. And so please, what do you think is the pandemic doing to women's pensions? I think there were some statistics that I saw that were just recently published, right? That women save at an equal level or at an adequate level, yet the amount we save is just so disproportionately lower. I think it was £1,300 a year, which was basically 1/3 less than the men save. So now we are being hit by this pandemic, and as Inga said it, we have to keep pushing. What is this doing to our pensions?
Thanks, Olga, and really glad to be on the panel today and talking about this subject. I mean, I hazard I'm not, the expert, but I do look at this issue deeply in relation to how pensions affect women's lives. And as Olga and as Inga said, women do live longer. We have longer life expectancies. We always have. Women have always been the majority of pensioners. And so when we look at pensions issues, we are looking at a gender issue. And one of the things that's happened with pensions, and you alluded to a report that came out last week, through Scottish Widows, which showed from a behavioural perspective, this is not that women are doing things that are wrong. Women are actually saving just as much as their male counterparts. But what happens is, because the majority of retirement income is derived through occupational pensions, any form of inequality that exists within the workplace, within employment, within earnings, then gets translated into pensions income. And so what we see is, as women either drop out of the workplace or indeed get paid less. So we know that, equal pay day was this week as well. So all of those things don't just hit your purse today, they translate over time. And if you think that those are invested into sort of long-term savings vehicles, a lot of people may not realize that in the past, you would have had something probably called like a defined benefit scheme. Now that would smooth out over time. You'd get an average, you might get a gold watch when you retired, but they would kind of take your best years and put that into your pension. The majority of people do not have that now. Most people working now will, at least in the UK, will be enrolled into some form of defined contribution pension. And what that means is you are entirely exposed. If you've got a gap in your employment history, if you're earning less, for example, for a few years, maybe you've taken time out to work part-time, to work for yourself, all of that, there's no smoothing mechanism that's going to make good for that. So that accumulates over time. And that means that over time, we're getting less and less than our male counterparts in terms of our pensions overall. But to add to something, again, that Inga talked about, again, we're all reliant for those occupational pensions on the stock market. Now, in the long term, that's probably going to make good, but certainly in the short term, we're not seeing those sort of high returns that we might want to rely on in terms of making up our pension pots overall. So I think for me, it's not that it's a terrible picture, but certainly we need to start to look really with some sharp relief now if we want to make sure that women do have sufficient income in retirement to live on as they get older.
And so with what you just explained, is that part of the reasons why you started a project which is called the Feminist Pension Project? Do you want to share a little bit about that and what the objectives of it are?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like Inga, I worked in financial services and we used to look at things like, under saving, for example, adequacy, income replacement. And at some point, as I was sort of working on all of these projects, I learned this horrifying statistic that women had 1/5 of the pension income of their male counterparts in retirement. And I thought, well, that can't be true. My initial reaction was, let me see the data, must be wrong. And then after that, I started to uncover more. And I learned the other key stat that underpins all of my research, which is regardless of socioeconomic background, whether or not you have children, because a lot of people kind of think, oh, I'll get hit if I have children, whether or not you have children, what job you do, on average, as a woman, you will have less retirement income than your male counterpart. And that really made me think, we're not problematizing women. This is not all women. All women cannot be making the wrong decisions. There must be something with the system that means that we've got this consistent pattern of gendered outcomes. And so what my research looks at is, yes, we really need to understand, how are women making decisions? How do women imagine their own futures? But similarly, how might the institution of pensions respond so that we can level up, so that we can have an equal and fair game? And the reason why I say this, it's not just about women taking a piece of the pie. Why should men live longer, shorter, richer lives? At the end of the day, we want to work in a way that is sustainable for everybody, because all of these issues that affect women affect men too. But at the moment, women have to navigate a landscape that in truth is stacked against us.
That's all very interesting. And I think I will link to one thing that really stuck with me when you were in one of your talks saying that we basically, in order to reimagine our pension, have to reimagine our lives in the old age, because it will look very differently. The question would be, do we also need to reimagine our lives now? And how do you believe will our life in the future look like?
I think this is a really good point. Life expectancy is getting longer for absolutely everybody, but not necessarily health, and I think traditionally we've always sort of thought of retirement maybe around sort of, late 50s, early 60s. The truth is that we will be living longer, and we probably should be thinking about our earnings capacity over time. This is something that I come back to time and time again. If that is about investing in yourself so that you can work longer, you can work differently, so that you can spread that risk, that even within relationships, for example, that you negotiate what that means. And obviously SmartPurse is a great tool to help people to really think about that. But again, it's just getting people to think beyond just what's in their pocket. And I know for a lot of people, that's the reality. It's how do I pay the bills? How do I pay the rent? How do I pay the mortgage? How do I pay the childcare? But in truth, when you really think about the long term and how that translates, thinking about what finance looks like when you're 75 is actually really quite real, when maybe your employment options may be different from what they are when you're 45, for example. So part of that for me, what I encourage is that people really think about that journey of life and where you'll get to. It's a lot longer than perhaps we've been encouraged to think about. And so the decisions that you make today, maybe for your 75 or 85-year-old self, what might you do if you're less mobile, for example, I think can really help us to draw ourselves out of the present to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves in the future as well.
Which of course sounds absolutely wonderful, but then also research suggests that it's exactly the younger women, right, that have the biggest difficulties, them being the ones not having leveraging their savings to the full or starting to invest. And I think that is probably where we need to have the most attention, as Inga already also said it as well. Now, let me turn to you, Jack, because one thing Daniela mentioned was like, yeah, we have to rethink our income capacity, basically. I think is that what you said, Daniela, right? And entrepreneurship or starting your own business is one way to do that. Now, you work for an organization, Metal, that basically has taken it up on itself to provide a financial instrument or free business accounts for female founders and for all founders in general, right? Can you share a little bit, why is NatWest doing this? Why does the world need another app for entrepreneurship?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think what's clear to people is that the way we're all working is changing fundamentally. There are now 5 million self-employed people across the UK, and that's growing at a rapid rate. And COVID has just absolutely accelerated that. We've had 200,000 people, unfortunately, been made redundant through this crisis. And as the panel's already identified, a large proportion of them, unfortunately, are female workers. And we've also seen 9 million people over lockdown be furloughed. And that's given people, on the flip side, it's given people a chance to really reassess how they want to go about their financial life and think about the way they earn money. And what we've seen is a rapid rise in the gig economy and what we like to call the liquid workforce, but it's essentially people earning something from, whether it's just a side hustle, small income to support their primary income, or whether it's to go the whole hog and to just set up a whole business for themselves. And we've seen a huge acceleration of that since March. Companies House released data that 200,000 small businesses were formed between March and July. And we've seen 20-30% year-on-year increases in the amount of businesses being formed post that. So where Metal really sits is it's there designed to support the liquid workforce. It's the small sole traders, the small side hustlers, all the way through to the small businesses. And these are the segments that have typically been underserved over the last few years. Large institutions, large banks, financial institutions, they chase the money, they chase the revenue. So they serve the big corporates, they serve the big businesses. And actually, it's those small entrepreneurs, no matter how small, no matter how big, it's those entrepreneurs that are going to be the ones that really recover the UK economy out of this crisis. And they're the ones that need the most support, because typically, it's, how do I sort my tax out? How do I raise an invoice? How do I, it's all those little jobs that actually traditionally have been, underserved. There's not been a product out there to really support people through that. And that's really where Metal comes in. It's a free digital business account where you can just get up and go, and you have more time to be able to run the business that you want to run, or the side hustle you want to run. I just want to touch on, obviously the theme of this panel is it's obviously around how we can build the confidence for female entrepreneurs as well. And I'm pleased to say that there's quite a lot going on to support female entrepreneurs. You've got the Rose Review that was obviously kicked off last year by the government to really identify and understand why it is that there's a gap between female entrepreneurship and male entrepreneurship, a gap that's worth 250 billion if we can bring it onto parity. And there's already been some constructive steps taken and initiatives taken to be able to close that gap, I'm pleased to say. So, there's, NatWest itself announced a 1 billion in female entrepreneurship funding. There's also been a Back Her Business, which is a crowdfunding platform specifically for female entrepreneurs. And really I hope that closes the gap and really helps female entrepreneurs get up and go and join this movement, which is, Britain, the self-employed are Britain's biggest employer, and people should join that. And I think these initiatives really do support specifically female entrepreneurs, but I guess the movement itself supports everyone to sort of think differently about how they earn money and how they take control of their financial life.
Yeah, we have a question from the audience just directly linked to that, right? So despite everything that's being done, female founders receive basically 3% of funding. Right, that's how small the ticket is. And if you were to imagine this being a huge pile of 100%, this tiny, tiny little bubble that goes to female founders. And here was Olivia was asking, whether that might be also related to the fact, as was mentioned on the last panel, that we kind of have this inherent feeling of talking about money or even asking for it being an act of greed or something that we are not entitled to do. And I would be interested actually to hear from you, Jack, but also from anyone else on the panel. Do you feel that is one of the reasons why the female entrepreneurs might not get to the bigger tickets? Or do you see other examples?
I think it's one. I think another example is, we just need to show that there are some fantastic female entrepreneurs out there who do, forge their own path and really drive innovation. And I think we need to showcase that a bit more and give and show role models across the rest of the UK and drive this awareness that actually, although it is tough to set up your own business and to try and raise capital to be able to fund a larger business, it can be done. And there are many support mechanisms out there for people to be able to join and to be able to get access to capital to set up a business. And I think it's that awareness. And I think if we keep talking about it and we keep showing how, these initiatives are working and are there and available, then I think it just gives everybody this confidence that yes, I can take control of my financial life and I can start something for myself, no matter how small. It can just be selling something you're making on Depop or on Etsy or something like that. It doesn't have to be a big bang retail outlet on the high street. It can be something small. The technology is enabling that for people these days.
Inga, Daniela, any perspectives on the female entrepreneurs from your end, Inga?
From my perspective, looking at my own research and the data that comes through, I think it's fantastic that, a lot of women want to kind of take control of their own futures. But one of the things I see is that there's a real distinction between people who have a really fantastic idea and they want to take it forward and they're sort of ambitious for their business, and some people who effectively they tell me that they're sort of forced out of the workplace and this is a route that they take because they couldn't be accommodated within the workplace, particularly actually people who have either caring responsibilities or people who have disabilities, for example, and they just can't sort of fit within the employment sphere. And then a lot of the things that Jack was talking about, having to navigate what's quite a complex landscape, I think is part of that. So that sort of support to help people on that journey, I think really would go a long way, especially when it comes to thinking about things like occupational pensions, sort of the tax implications around that, even things like state pensions, so sometimes people aren't even sort of investing in terms of their sort of national insurance contributions, so they're missing out twice. So there's a lot of information that I think we can make available to entrepreneurs so that they're not sort of left floundering in an environment which some tell me, that they never expected to find themselves in.
Absolutely, and we've got to champion these people. It's like, this is a new way of working. It's like, people do have more commitments during the day. We don't have to work 9 to 5 anymore. We can work around our hectic lives and earn money around our hectic lives, and it's easier than ever to do. It's just we need to build that awareness and show people that there are mechanisms out there to support you to be able to flourish and to do that.
Inga, I think you had a comment on this.
Yeah,
right?
I just wanted to add something, because I found that a lot of women who were working with me somewhere in the insurance sector, they chose to leave, even, perhaps in their 40s, 50s, they chose to leave and become an entrepreneur because they couldn't stand the corporate politics. So I've seen a lot of women choose to do that. But even then, a lot of them, they go after something because it's really purpose driven. They're really passionate about something. And every time they then share their idea, I say, so how are you going to make some money out of it? How are you going to make some money out of it? And it's that you've got to balance with your wonderful passion about changing the world. Make sure you can make some money out of it too.
Well, I recognize myself in that statement every day, right? Let me come to you, Tracy. I'm so fortunate that everybody made it on the panel one way or the other, so one should never lose faith, which is great. Tracy, you have been in financial services for a very, very long time, and actually you help people with their wealth, right? Families, charities, or charitable institutions, wealthy individuals. During this pandemic, have you seen people's attitude to money changing? Like, do they donate more? Do they invest more? Has there been any distinct differences?
Okay, can you hear me first? Because I've had so many problems with the tech. You can, great, okay. People's attitudes to money, well, I think initially when, back in March, when this all seemed to happen so quickly, I think at the beginning of the year, we were very aware that there was a virus in China. By March, markets into total free fall. And I think at that point, people were concerned, obviously, about money that they'd had invested. I think that going into lockdown was, a situation that none of us had ever experienced before. And so I think at that point, everybody was just taking stock of where they were, what they had, what they were going to do, were their jobs safe and all of that sort of stuff. I think because of the global response in terms of the, central banks, the governments, at the speed of which that support level was placed, and therefore, whilst we saw a huge drop, the fact that the stock market dropped so quickly, we've seen that before, but this was very, very different. The fact that the global response was so quick, then I think that kind of put everybody on a bit of a calmer setting. But people have had to, look to their finances, because whether they're running their own businesses, whether their business has been affected, whether they've had to put people on furlough, whether they've had to try and help family members that maybe have been, impacted through their jobs, or also from health reasons. So yes, initially I think, there was that, what's my liquid money? What can I do? Is the family okay? Is my business going to be okay? Looking at availability of all of the things that were offered by the government to help, so for furlough and to help businesses and everything else like that. I think as things have kind of calmed down, people, and during these times, there's always immense opportunities in markets. So people that have had surplus cash, actually, I think I've seen, and brave going into markets when markets are, pretty low, there are opportunities. But I really have seen people looking at money in a different way. We've learned that, what's important, our family, our health, as well as, keeping our businesses going. But I have seen far more philanthropic moves, people wanting to give back, people, not just money. It's not just a money thing, but in terms of philanthropy, it's actually wanting to get to the root cause and really help, give their time and make connections with people, use their network to help. So I think I've seen a broad attitude of, obviously, people investing, and I've also seen people really wanting to use their money for good causes. Charities are really struggling in terms of, raising money. So I've really seen, particularly my high net worth individuals, wanting to give back on the philanthropic side of things, which has been really positive.
And did you observe that, I think also Jack mentioned it before, right? There is a lot of support for female entrepreneurs. There is more giving coming up, that these patterns change and everything focuses more on local communities, the local countries. Is there a shift observable in this?
Yes, I think so. So I mean, if you look at what's driven kind of markets up, there's the tech sector, big companies like Amazon doing incredibly well. I think a lot of people are really wanting to look locally, looking to support small businesses during this really difficult time. Yes, definitely have seen that. But just going back on one point, you were talking about female entrepreneurs not necessarily, or one of the comments earlier was female entrepreneurs not getting as much money to start up new businesses, and particularly lots of people, looking at doing that at the current time. I've been in the kind of financial services and banking for 100 years, actually 30 years, but feels like 100. And one of the things I've noticed in the past, and I think it's still true today, is that, and this is generalization, but women often have a lower risk appetite to men. So one of the things I've seen prior is, you may have a female entrepreneur wanting to set up a business, a great idea, and thinking, well, I need to go to the bank and I need to ask for, I think probably I need £5,000 or £10,000, but actually if I cut the cost here, if I'm careful here, I'll ask for less. So I'll ask for, let's just say you need 10, you ask for 5 and you'll get the 5. A guy would probably have, and this is again generalization, but I see it so often, a guy would think, okay, well, okay, 5 will be fine, but actually I'm going to ask for 20 because I could expand, I could do this, that, and other, and they'll ask for more. I don't think it's that they're getting less. I think they're asking for less. Would you say that you've seen that, Jack? That on a risk profile basis, they're maybe not as greater risk takers?
That's not something that we've seen at Metal. I can't speak for the wider UK trend. I honestly don't know. What we observe is that quite a lot of the businesses or side hustles that we have are, people generally don't need as much capital to get going, right? They just start with something maybe they've made with they've created at home, or they go into they're teachers or yoga teachers, or all of that. They're making small goods and selling them on the side, for example. So it's less the sort of large scale big enterprises. It's more, and that's the majority of people, right? The majority of people are these side hustlers and small professionals. They're selling their time, or they're selling a small item there. So I think in that regard, there's probably less of a barrier to entry, and that's why I talk quite passionately about this, because I think that if people are given the confidence to be able to go and start something, no matter how small, and we can show people that actually it is the biggest trend, it's the biggest employer of the UK as a self-employed, then more people will join it. And I think that then spurs on all these different things that you're talking about. People think locally, they buy locally, they think consciously.
Yeah, definitely seeing that without question. Definitely people wanting to support the local high street rather than the big stores and stuff. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and my phone is running hot here with questions. Absolutely, I can't almost keep up. There is one that I think probably will be for you, Inga or Daniela, which is around, what about the existing structural or cultural barriers facing women? Could you please comment on how that prevents or limits uptake of the financial opportunities?
Well, I think there are some cultures, of course, where women weren't even allowed to have bank accounts and things. And it really is true. And even, I've lived many years in Switzerland, and there was a time in Switzerland where you couldn't open a bank account as a woman. You had to get them, your husband's permission. So, and this isn't that long ago. So there are cultural issues that have been in place for centuries that impact women anyway, but the sort of structural things that exist in the UK today are still, a lot of them are manageable. It's for instance, when you're getting a divorce, make sure that the pension is considered on divorce, put it in the pot. I remember an anecdote of a colleague who was cheering with joy, a male colleague. His divorce had gone through and he'd safeguarded his entire pension, and he was so happy. And I just think this is what happens. And these are the things that a lot of groups are lobbying for policymakers, regulators and things, people to change. And there is action and there is some progress.
So while we are moving slowly to the end of the panel. Maybe let me do a quick round, because a lot has been said about the status, the pensions, people's attitudes, the entrepreneurs. What is the one thing that you recommend all of us and the women watching here they should do tomorrow in order to secure their future? And let's start with Daniela.
Think about your earnings capacity. Absolutely. Whether you're in a relationship, whether you're not in a relationship, whether you're employed at the moment or not, think about your earnings capacity and how you can really grow that over time.
And Tracy, the one recommendation from you.
I think it would be to really, really understand your finances, know your costs, have a budget, what's essential, what's nice to have. Can you make some savings? Is there a shortfall? What's available to you? I think if you really build a financial plan, that's quite empowering. Talk to somebody about your finances, get some advice if needed. But I think it's that. I think particularly with COVID, it's caused so much anxiety, and financial stress is even more. But I think often people put their head in the sand. So really take ownership of your finances and know what that is, and then look at what's available.
And Jack?
Well, I mean, I'll just reiterate that there's a movement happening out there. This is the time for people to go and start something, no matter how small, no matter how big. And it's never been as easy in terms of setup, right? It's there's tools, there's tech out there, there's gig economy platforms out there where you can do something you love, and it can just be something small on the side to support your primary income, or it can be something if you take the big leap, it can be something that can be much bigger, and you can turn into something much more you're central to your life. And I would just say there's lots of support out there for female entrepreneurs, as I've said, are outlined in the Rhodes Review. So it's never been the better time to start something for yourself.
And Inga.
Yes, well, the fact that you've joined the Money Rally today means you've made a great start. So just continue to tap into the resources that are out there. Check out insuringwomensfutures.co.uk. There's loads of information there about all the things you can do to make sure that you close that pension and wealth gap on retirement, and also look after your family in the meantime. And of course, Smart Purse, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Giving you advice so that you can be money savvy.
So a lot of positive spirit and actionable advice, which also probably is reflected in the audience if one looks at the last poll we just took, which is about what new opportunities will you be exploring as this recession continues. 0% voted, I am happy as I am. So everybody is ready to change. And here is where kind of the energy will go. 26% starting my own business, Jack. So a lot of new clients building up for you. 29% working closely with my local communities to make them better, which I think is fantastic. And 46% shake up my savings and pensions. So on that note, I think all the energy is out there. Thank you so much, Inga, Daniela, Jack, and Tracy for joining this panel. I will have to ask you to leave the stage now so that I can be joined by Jude. Thanks so much for joining Money Rally. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and so it's me just all alone, and there should be Jude. There she is. Hi, Jude.
Hi. Sorry, that was very engrossing. I really enjoyed it. Again, for people who kind of have joined later, it's important to know that Olga and I, starting this company together, did it for many of the reasons that have just been said. We're very purpose-driven. We want to change the culture. We want to shape our communities and our communities of women. I'm not from a financial background, so I'm still on a huge learning curve. And then Olga has been in finance all her life, but wants to shape and change the culture of finance. So all of these things speak to us as women, don't they, Olga? They're not things that we just feel kind of, old news. This is a changing environment.
Absolutely. That said, I'm on a huge learning curve as well, right? Because finance has a huge issue with language, and it has a huge issue with understandability. So by Jude, I'm actually being challenged every single day. And even though I already think I do a fairly good job whenever we look at something together, oh my God, it is eye-opening how far we still have to come to step out of our own financial box to actually make, I think, the knowledge accessible to many more people.
That's right. Yeah, we're really trying to say that money shouldn't be full of jargon. It's got to be straightforward, but we need to talk about it. So, Olga, we're nearly at another break time, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we also have a great surprise for everybody, right? Do you want to introduce the surprise? Because money shouldn't be only boring and only about the figures. So we thought of something very special, but I'll let you introduce that. So
we have a poet who's going to give you her reading on a money poem that she wrote. She'll be explaining it. Her name's Caroline Bird. She is this year's winner of the Forward Poetry Prize for the collection that she wrote, Air Year, and so she's going to do something which we all need, which is bring poetry into our lives while we reflect on how we're going to make change happen. After this, I think we go into different groups. So you'll go into your different places to the sessions. I'll say yet again, make sure that you join the community of SmartPurse. We want to keep building this community, and every time one of you joins, we give a free membership to a woman from domestic violence charities. But yes, over to Caroline Bird for the factory floor.
Showing your true self to your partner, being scared of revealing your heart as if they might scrutinize the account of it and find errors or inconsistencies. Because I think money is so unhealthily linked to our sense of self-worth as people, and it's why it's as difficult to talk about as sex. The factory floor. Things have got better, I announced over the tannoy. I'd been guaranteed a huge order, and I couldn't wait to put my staff's fears to rest. The effect was instantaneous. I saw the factory floor transform beneath me, from a Victorian painting of miserable toil into a bouncing club, modern and sentient. They hugged each other, threw their caps in the air, cried like families reunited after a long war. They composed a group song called Things Have Got Better. Looking down from my office window, I watched their conga line weave through the drilling machines. The next day, we lost the contract. We were hemorrhaging funds. Pay cuts were inevitable, mass redundancies. I switched on the tannoy to deliver the difficult truth and yelled, "Free money!" The floor fell silent. I slapped my culprit of a mouth, bad mouth. I was cupping their happiness like a ladybird in my hands. No one moved. The foreman texted, "Sorry, boss, what do you mean?" "I mean precisely what I said," my voice boomed out from the speakers. "From now on, if you ever need cash at the weekend, 30 quid for a decent bottle of wine or a cheeky grand for your daughter's wedding, a tenner for sushi, I won't ask questions, just write your name and the desired amount on a piece of paper, pop it in my pigeonhole, and I'll transfer the money into your account within 24 hours. I was surprised by the exactness of my detail. Free money! It was fun to shout. Free money! They ran around like children high-fiving each other. They added a verse to their song all about me. It was like watching a hip new musical from the best seat in the house. Next morning, I stepped up solemnly. Time to get real. Listen up, everybody. Okay, there's no easy way to say this, but due to insurmountable financial 4-day week. We're switching to a 4-day week, but your salary will stay the same. Shit. They were staring up at me with slight concern, like picnickers clocking a cloud. Why didn't they believe me? Didn't they like me anymore? I was speaking on a tannoy. I was on the top floor. I had my own parking space. How could they doubt the transparency of a glass office? I persevered. I know you're probably finding it a bit weird receiving all this increasingly brilliant news from your boss on a daily basis. It's weird for me too. The truth is, our factory is just unbelievably successful. In fact, our accountant is worried we might have too much money. I felt the air soften. It was like watching a fast motion nature video of a million roses blooming simultaneously. I became the full-time bearer of good news. For the next 3 weeks, I ran a factory devoted to the manufacture of applause. Roaming masseuse, circus Tuesdays. I only spoke to induce cheering. Lifetime employment guarantee. I brought so much sunshine into people's lives, my skin blistered. Although the prosecution would later describe this time as a manic lying spree, I remember it as my month of magical thinking.
Hi.
Hello again.
Yes. I mean, that was quite a chilling idea about how much we want to be pretending about our lives and our personal lives and our money lives. Thank you, Caroline Bird. It was just really wonderful and frightening. We want to thank a few people before you go off into your rooms to do some deep dives into the next sessions. We want to thank Pollinate for sponsoring this, and we want to thank Stylist Magazine for becoming partners on it and giving us a good profile. We want to keep drawing your attention to surviving economic abuse and Safe Lives Matter as part of our concern to make sure that women who have difficult and severe circumstances are included in these money conversations. Olga, who else do we want to thank?
Well, everybody who joined us today, because it's the community, the sistering up that actually makes this super exciting. Otherwise, we would just be talking at our experts. That wouldn't be a lot of fun. And the whole SmartPurse team, everybody in the team sitting in the backstage. As I think many people know, we still are a very small team, but incredibly passionate. And so I think it's wonderful that we were able to do this event with all of you today. That said, it leads me to very short operational remarks. From here, you please will be moving to your breakout session. That means clicking on the button on your screen, the stage sessions. It looks like a group of people when you look at it on the screen. And then just please enter the room that you wish to join. We have very exciting sessions on dealing with divorce dilemmas, battling the impacts of part-time work, investing with very small amounts and how you can make that a habit. So there are 4 wonderful workshops for you to join. And of course, we would be super delighted if you were also to join SmartPurse. As Jude already says, for every woman that joins, we pass it forward to 10 other ones that need it. With that, I thank you very much. And Jude, any final words from you?
Well, just to say that FinTech Alliance gave us support. And what I could report back is that the language and energy around financial services is changing, and SmartPurse is part of making that change quicker with women at the center of the story. So it's been great to have you all here, and I'm going off to one of the sessions myself. I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to. I think I'll go with, well, how can I start investing with a little amount of money?
That's my session. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, having you there, Jude. Bye,
Okay.
everybody. Have a wonderful workshop. Bye.
Feedback. Give us our feedback. Yeah. Thank you.